Hello and welcome to the Modern Android Development panel. So this is a bit different to the technical talks you might have heard before. We're not here to talk at you. There are no slides. This is going to be a discussion, we hope, between all of us. The great things about being back at the conference is that we can actually talk together, not just online. So if you caught the keynote this morning by my colleagues here on stage, then you will have heard them say that modern Android development is a set of libraries, guidance, tools to make Android development faster and easier. But as Florian says, we're not done. Like, we want to know what is still too hard. Like, what would you like to see Google tackle to make Android development better, to make it faster, to make it easier, to solve the problems that you have? So this is us saying, like, tell us. Come to the mics. We have mics 1, 2, 3. So maybe form lines there. It'll be a very, very short panel if you don't have any questions. So please do come up and ask us, like, whatever you like. So yeah, looking forward to having a good discussion with you, but maybe we could start by introducing ourselves and saying a little bit about what we work on. So my name is Nick Butcher, and I work on modern Android development.
I'm José Alcerrica, and I guess I'll answer questions about testing and a little bit of architecture.
My name is Wojtek. I work mostly on Kotlin, build, so Android Gradle plugin, and performance.
Florina Montanescu, Compose.
Manuel Vivo, I can answer some questions about architecture, depending on the question.
And dependency injection.
Yeah, dependency injection, maybe something Kotlin, coroutines, we'll see.
And Premier League football.
And football.
Okay.
Real Madrid, Rafa Nadal.
Okay.
And I think we have a first question.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for playing first.
Hi, really nice to have you all here. I have a question about the snapshot testing. Are you planning to have any official support for snapshot testing from Google itself?
Great question. Let's talk about one thing. Snapshot or screenshot testing? No, it's fine. A lot of people call it a snapshot testing, but there's a feature in Android Studio called snapshot for emulators. So I'm trying to steer everyone from that step.
Yeah, screenshot.
It's something that we're looking at right now because we believe it's super important, especially in Compose.
Yeah.
We are talking to paparazzi and dropshots and shot, etc., all the authors to see what we can do to make especially the setup process better because it has some edge, some problems, I guess. So at least we're going to try to make that experience better. Apart from that, I can't comment on future developments. Yeah.
I think we have another one there.
Round robin.
So my question would be, there are bridges between Compose and Android views, right? Which are recommended to use if you want to build in part of the Compose UI in the old, let's say, XML-based view. What about performance? I heard there are some concerns that if you are integrating Compose into the Recycler view, for example, using these bridges, it can go down in performance drastically. So is it the case? Are there any recommendations around those?
I can take a pass.
Go for it.
You want to
Go for it.
go? It's hard to say, is there, isn't. It's not a binary thing here. Generally, performances do less work. And every time you kind of go from the views into Compose lands, every time you have a Compose view hosting a Compose hierarchy, there is some work that it needs to do to set it up. So getting to a world where you're all Compose is obviously a lot less work, because you only need to cross that bridge once for your entire app. Whereas if you have a multiple Compose views, that's more work to be done. That's not saying that never ever use Compose views within your view hierarchy or even a Recycler view, because it can be perfectly performant, but it depends how much work you are doing. We are doing a bunch of work to try and improve this out of the box. We recently updated Compose and Recycler view to both understand each other and can have a default composition strategy, which is better for the recycling view case specifically. And we're doing a lot of work. But I don't want to say this is unperformant. I would say profile your app, make sure you're profiling a release build with R8 running on it and so on. And if you're seeing issues, then dig into it and try and understand. We've seen people get into a situation where like they have like a crazy complex base item which all their recycled view items extend from. So it's like a constraint layout with something else, with something else, with something else, which then includes a compose view. And yeah, that's gonna become expensive. But I say like tools, not rules. So profile it, and if you find problems, dig into it. Like it should be completely performant. If you find a case where it's not, then please file bugs, because we want those repro cases so that we can make it better for you.
To add on to that, so performance is something that we care a lot about. So earlier this year at Google I/O, we had a talk on performance in Compose. We also updated our documentation to have a page on performance, like a few best practices and things to keep in mind.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Let's go this side.
Yeah. Hello. I have a question. Do you have any plans on adding sort of safe arcs to Compose navigation by any chance?
Yeah, I think that's a request we've been getting so far, but so far we don't talk that much about future development, but so far not. So still using the Kotlin DSL. We might think about how to solve this problem in documentation guidance, like how to bring type safety to Compose navigation, but I don't think that's in the radar right now. So we're trying to, try to relieve those pain points as much as possible. So yeah, we know that that's something that the community is asking. Yeah, we'll try to solve it as best as we can.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Go for it.
They disappeared. Awesome. There were people there.
There was somebody there. Okay.
Same question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, this is probably a really silly question, but this morning in the keynote, there was an example where, I can't remember what it was, a user messaging system, and the view model contained compose state as opposed to like a state flow or some other state holder. Is that the recommended approach? And at what point is it not okay to have compose state in the view model?
The only reason we added compose state there was to make that line shorter, so we didn't have to collect.
Okay.
But Manu has an answer for that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the way you create that UI state. And usually, if you depend on data sources or like flows coming from the data layer, then it's usually you want a reactive UI state there. In that sense, like you wouldn't create, for example, a mutable state of, because usually you want that reactivity to flow to the UI as well. So if you rely on streams, then probably you are better off creating a state flow there with a stating operator combining different streams. But if your UI state like only relies on things coming from the view model, you could use the API that you want. A mutable state of is a good pattern there. Other stuff like you might want some reactivity as well in the view model, and then it's a good pattern to have, for example, like your mutable state having like compose APIs that then you can combine with other streams. You can use a snapshot flow, and you can combine it with the rest of the streams. But yeah, like if it's not reactive and you have the information there in the view model, you can use the API you want. Compose state might give you more simplicity. It could be easier to observe from compose code, but yeah, it's depending on the use case. But you can do that.
And we have some examples in our documentation guidelines, right, showing how you might consider using snapshot state in your view model as well, if you want to, if it's a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. We're actually working on more guidance about this, how to create and expose that UI state from view models. It's not there yet, but it will come soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hello again. I stepped back to double check stuff. But I wanted to ask about the compose performance, because you mentioned, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. I asked the same question at I/O, the live show that Chetas was hosting, and Florina just kind of answered that it's not good to use compose in SDK, but I wanted to maybe get more detail about why the performance issue is happening on the SDK side if we have some UI inside the SDK. Is there anything that we can say, okay, we will accept that performance issue, but we use the nice compose, or it's a really bad thing?
Oh, so I wasn't saying that you would have performance issues if you have composing on SDK, but rather if you're building an SDK, then definitely performance is something that you should keep an eye on. Mm-hmm. Because you're building an SDK that has performance issues that will afterwards impact all of the apps that it's being used from. So Compose doesn't bring any performance problems just because it's in an SDK.
And in fact, we want people to build SDKs with Compose, right? It's our future UI toolkit, so it's not like we want to discourage anyone.
This is the one I remember this question and I was mouthing at you to say, include a baseline profile because it's so important that if you are shipping Compose to your clients that you give them the best performance as possible. So ensure that you're shipping baseline profiles with your libraries as well.
Yeah, so that's something I wanted to mention as well. So if you were watching today's keynote, I mentioned that you should be shipping baseline profiles with your apps. But there's actually another thing that I didn't mention, which is that libraries, so SDKs, can ship baseline profile rules for the code they contain as well. So Compose does that. So Compose already ships rules for its own code. But then if you build anything around it, if you build an SDK or even build your app with Compose, it's great to generate more baseline profile rules for your SDK or for your app. And then when you want to test it, Florina already mentioned that you should be testing performance in a release build. On a debug build, you get all kinds of problems with performance, and you don't get the baseline profile boost, right? So if you test on a release build with baseline profiles, that's what you should be looking at, because that's what your users will really get on their devices.
One last question, maybe. We are going to provide a view, ignoring if the client app is using Compose or not, but does using Compose inside the SDK in an app that doesn't use Compose can cause any issue? Or you cannot think of it? Okay, I will keep you posted.
Let us know.
Thank you.
In the center.
I want to ask about the unidirectional flow about UI events or the events, view model events coming to the UI. We talked today. And as most of us, I guess I was first using the single live event class from your article, Jose, and and there was another article that came later. We switched to channels to do everything in Kotlin, and after that, the latest recommendation is to make it part of the UI view, view model state. This was not completely convincing for me because the first solutions, they were kind of taking away most of the boilerplate code that UI would tell the view model, hey, I handled it. And in this new recommendation, we're kind of have to not to forget to every time tell the view model, hey, I handled it. And as developers, we'll tend to automate some stuff. So if we see a lot of boilerplate, we will start putting it in a common, and we'll immediately go to I have a feeling we'll immediately go to the previous solution. So I'm still sticking with the channels, exactly what the documentation said not to do. And is it more for Compose world? Because I'm not yet there. I'm not using Compose, sorry, but I'll get to it. I'm trying to understand if it makes sense to already, because for me, it's again going one step back and again writing a lot of boilerplate code.
Yeah. So if you're not using Compose, then I am sorry, first of all. But so many things to say here. So in the single live event blog post, actually, the first option was to do exactly this, to do what I recommended this morning, right? But I said, don't do this because it has a lot of boilerplate code and we can do better. However, we changed the guidance because with Compose, we think it's much better to be, to do the correct thing instead of being a little bit more convenient. The truth is, it's only snack bar events and navigation events. There's not many other things. So you're not going to end up with lots of methods in your view model to receive all those resets in practice. At least I haven't found that problem. So, I think using the right thing, or the right thing would be going for correctness, especially in the Compose world. However, about channels, it's just not an opinion. It's actually a technical problem. Manu, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, about the single live event thing, whenever we give guidance, we want the guidance to be applicable to both views and Compose, right? And in Compose, your function can recompose at any point. So whenever you do that, get handled if like something like it gets handled once, right? Like if you handle it and then your compose functions recomposes, you lost the event, and that's not acceptable in some situations. Regarding channels, they work under very specific conditions. If you are under those conditions, which is like sending and getting the event from the main immediate dispatcher, you're going to be OK with it. But if you try to do something else, you can also lose those events. And so our guidance is trying to be like generic enough so that the delivery and the processing of that event needs to be guaranteed in some way. And the view model doesn't have a reference to the UI, right? So it cannot call those events. And following UDF, unidirectional data flow, the best way to expose application data, it's by means of the UI state. And even like you can set an event, and the UI might not even be there. So state is going to give you that guarantees. And actually, whenever we are talking about this guidance, that should be applicable to the vast majority of applications. We cannot give like some solutions that work sometimes, right? So if it works for your use case, you use single life event and it's working, keep using it. But at some point, if it doesn't fit your use case, you might take a look again at our guidance and then trying to see how you can get from there.
Yep. My question is regarding, in the presentation layer, we have the view model. And we normally want to have these view models providing the view state as complete as possible. Then a view can be extremely dumb. But we have some cases when we get, for example, meters as a value. But depending on the preference of the user or the location of the user in the world, this can be miles or kilometers. What is your opinion, actually, regarding where we map this information? Because this information needs to be mapped with the context. We need the context to know the preference of the user. In the view model, or we should give this piece of logic to the view and don't pass the context to the view model?
I think in that case, like if that's something that is a preference of the user, probably it's going to be stored in disk, in data store, or room. Then that information is going to flow to the UI.
The bottom. Okay.
And when it comes to presentation, like doing formatting and all that, that's UI logic, and that should be actually in the UI itself. Actually, like tomorrow I'm talking about architecture, and I'm covering this topic, like what to do with UI logic. That could be in the UI itself, or you might want to create a plain class to handle all that complexity. So if tomorrow you're invited to come to the talk, but I would prefer to have it in the UI, because the UI might be different, for example, after a configuration change, right? You can have a different local, like the UI might be different, right? So you don't want to map that logic in the UI itself. The view model should be generic enough, expose application data, and then the UI now with Compose, for example, is easier to test, or you can have like that complexity moved out to a different plain class. UI.
Also, the fact that something requires a context doesn't mean that it has to be in the UI layer. If you think about databases, so miles or kilometers, that's data. So it should come from the data layer and then combined in the view model. So you don't need to go to the UI to get that piece of data.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. In Compose, what are my options for displaying simple HTML strings in text?
Mm-hmm. I think HTML used to have that. HTML from...
No, actually, Ale gave a talk this morning about text in Compose, and right now Compose doesn't support HTML formatting. So your best chance now is to use an Android view. Inside the Android view, you're going to have a text view, and then you can use the HTML compat from HTML. You pass in like few things, and you get the link movement as well. Like if you want to do some clicking on the HTML, and that's your I think the team is working on that, right? The team is working on providing
start the issue.
HTML. Start the issue, and the team will prioritize it. But yeah, don't miss Ale's talk. Yeah.
More questions?
Hi, my question is from Jose regarding the question that I asked before. Maybe I can repeat that. About testing the legacy code. Imagine that we have a legacy system that we just start working with, and we need to do refactoration and also add testing functionality every aspect that you just had the presentation on. So what approach could be good enough to go for keeping the current functionality, making sure that you don't miss something with the functionality and regression, and how can we start and what the approach could be?
Yeah, great question, first of all. We kind of covered this in the talk. So what are the things that you can do today, right? So the first one would be unit test the things that have no dependencies. Those are, low-hanging fruit. You just have that, and nothing is going to, it's not going to uncover any bugs, but you're going to have regression testing set up already for the future. So I would go for the very small things, and then also for the very big things. So I would create some kind of end-to-end tests that use synchronization mechanisms that you wouldn't use in UI, like in screen UI tests, probably. So you would have to use wait mechanisms, because obviously your test is not designed with testability in mind, so there's not going to be idling resources, and probably things are not going to set up correctly. So you can basically create less than optimal tests that would fit your situation. That way, once you have a good test suite of UI tests, you can, I assume you want to start a migration to something that is not legacy. So I would use that as, as a coverage for regression testing.
Interesting. Yeah. And I have done the same approach, and a question that came to my mind is that maybe I had the kind of, I have missed some part of that functionality that the old code had before, and I have now changed and refactored everything. And now with the current approach, maybe I am just missing them. Is there any other way to make sure that, like, if we go with a wider approach, wider vision on the current code, like testing end-to-end or any other approach, that we can first create some kind of behavioral testing, and then going to the refactoration and creating unit tests, and then next steps?
Yeah, I think you answer yourself. So when you are creating these tests that are going to be used in a migration, you look for the things that are not going to change. So you try to make sure that the tests work well now and are going to work the same in the future, so that when you make the refactorings, you end up having the same suite of tests. That's definitely the idea.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So now that we're talking about refactoring, asking for a friend, it's not me, just a friend. Assume that you have a very old legacy code and everything is basically spaghetti or lasagna or worse. Where would you recommend to start the refactoring? Architecture, dependency injection? Where should we approach these super jumbled applications that is not do it again from scratch?
I can start answering. The first thing would be like defining the architecture, or like the end goal, where you want to be at, and then starting like step by step, making sure that your code is fully tested, so you don't add any problems down the line, and then trying, for example, like feature by feature. If you want to, I don't know, start adding Kotlin, for example, you can start in tests maybe, or then you can move some of your data sources to use flows, and then trying to have these smaller blocks that add on top of each other, and then start from there, one point. But yeah, I think having that ideal architecture in mind and your end goals very clear, that's definitely going to help. And test, yeah, definitely test.
And pray.
And pray.
Again, probably starting from things that don't have many dependencies, that are very isolated, would be a good idea, right? So that you can change this one isolated thing and see if the rest of the system still works, and then move on to the next one and the next one.
Yeah, actually, we talked a lot about screenshot testing. It would be a good idea to do that. So take the screenshot of how the legacy code looks, and then verify that whatever changes you're making are not changing the UI too much.
All right, thank you.
So you have stated that querying the context should be basically done on the presentation layer. But for example, if we see like to the data store, which explicitly requires context, which is, to be honest, very weird solution by Google, do you expect, even like querying the data or writing the data to the data store also in the presentation layer, which is maybe a bit like weird? So what's the question about, what's the solution in this context like? So should it only be used in the presentation layer or not?
No, I think that's the opposite of what I said. Yeah, I said that the context is not only used in the UI layer because the question kind of was going there. So yeah.
But I think here there is a small caveat that we can add. There is something that you can differentiate, right? Like you can differentiate between business logic, that's what the data store is going to do, like storing data, how to modify that. And then there is something like how to create those dependencies, like, I don't know how we call it, it's dependency injection logic, for example. It's how to create an instance of data store. Sure, for creating the instance of data store, you might need an application context, which is not a local context, with application context would do. So that how to create object logic should be differentiated from the actual business logic. So don't mix that up. And that's usually what the AI frameworks can do for you. Like some of them might generate some code for you, but even if you have you do dependency injection manually, try to differentiate those parts of your application, how you provide instances of type and what those types actually do. So sure, you might need the application context to create an instance of a data store, but that should be isolated from how you use data store, which usually is the data source, and it would be mapped by repositories and things like that. Thank you.
So one question, do you recommend having composing fragments? Can this influence the performance? Or another way, when is fragment going to be deprecated?
I think ideally, you don't need to use composing fragments, but we know that you're going to migrate your app to Compose. So then if you already have fragments, you will be in that intermediary step where you have composing your fragments, and that's OK. About like when fragments will be deprecated? I don't know.
Fragments are great. What do you mean?
Okay. Thank you.
Hello. So recently it was added like a safe way to collect flows in Compose called collect as state with lifecycle. First, why there wasn't like any like message or warning for the old one to not use it with Android pretty much, and what is the current use case for the old one, basically the collect as state, and where do you recommend to use it?
Great question. Thank you. It was added last week. It was released. About why not warning about collect as state, like, sure, like it was the only API we had at the moment. Yeah, we cannot add to the documentation, hey, don't use this because it's not gonna, for example, like stop collecting from the flow where it's gonna go, for example, to the background, the UI. We cannot put those kind of disclaimers. Why, like, when to use collect as state with lifecycle? Like, it is going to be useful if you have that reactive UI way of producing UI state, as I said earlier. Yeah, I don't know. Like, use it as we're trying to recommend it as default now, but we know that it's in alpha. So try give it a shot. Like, let's see if it works for your use case. I don't think. Did I miss anything? I don't know.
I mean, the API is not wrong per se. You just have to know how to use it and which lifecycle implications it has, right? So there's no warning to say, like, do not use collect as state. However, because we saw that it required 6 lines of code to do correctly, and you normally collect state many times from your UI, we decided to just add that syntactic sugar. So probably 90% of the people have no idea what we're talking about because we released it last week as an alpha. Yeah, follow Manu on Twitter. He talks a lot about that.
Did we miss any of your questions? I don't know if we fully
got
answered.
it all. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hello. So regarding Compose and memory leaks, I mean, since the dawn of time as an Android developer, I've been taught like you should watch out keeping a reference to the context because then it will cause memory leaks and so. And now in Compose, it's more or less I'm just extracting, taking local context.current and just throwing it around a bit everywhere, and it seems fine. Or does it? Is there like, where can there be memory leaks in Compose? Is there anything we should watch out for?
I don't know.
That's a great question.
I mean, I'm sure that we haven't invented a programming language or technology that you can't like use correctly. I'd say use Leak Canary or something to help like detect it. Like I don't want to give you a binary answer. No, there can never be leaks with Compose, or yes, there always are. I think it's a case of monitor for them and have a strategy in place to detect them. So
I think you can add actually the same memory leaks as if you were in the view system, but now because with Compose we are kind of starting from scratch, we can define best practices to avoid that. So for example, like with Compose from the very beginning, we recommended UDF, which is a nice way to avoid memory leaks. So now you learned in the way like we were recommending that. So you could, for example, like inject a coroutine scope, like a scope to the composition into a view model. Sure, you could do that, but don't. And so you can actually create the same memory leaks, but we kind of discourage that from the very beginning because that's not a good practice.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. So over the years, Android has added many concepts that come from other software realms, let's put it that way. Compose is just another one of them. UDF is another one of them. Rx Java, Rx Kotlin, whatever you name it. There are many technologies that are specific to Android, right? Kotlin is one example. Now it's being used on the let me finish. Google brought in the usage of Gradle as a build tool. It was used in other places as well. Now we have, for example, SQLite is something that exists in iOS, but we have Room, shared preferences, context, fragments, activities, so on, so on. So it's a very common thing that Android teams are isolated within their organizations. Only Android engineers contribute to Android code bases. That's certainly the case in my company, my previous company as well. JetBrains is pushing through Kotlin multi-platform, and the main thing people discuss is how do we bring iOS engineers to write Kotlin code? So backend engineers sometimes also want to contribute, but they, for example, there's an incident, we need to learn what Crashlytics is, what Firebase is. Let's put the app in production. It takes a couple hours to distribute and slowly roll out. It doesn't work like that. Like in backend or web as well. People build server-driven UI, people put web views in their apps, the list is infinite. What is Google doing to decrease the learning curve, the onboarding time for engineers that are not only Android engineers so that we can work as a company and not only as an isolated team?
Okay.
It's not an easy one to answer. You're right that there's a lot of history behind Android, right? So there's a lot of platform APIs that grew over the years. I guess with modern Android, we won't solve that problem exactly that you want for people to jump in from other technologies and be able to immediately start working on Android. But we are trying to reduce the learning curve. So everything that Jose said in the morning in the keynote, we're trying to be more opinionated, create this layer of interface between the inner Android working and what you really need to achieve your goal. So if you want to just store and read something from a database, you will have a clear way of doing it without learning all of the history of Android of how SQLite needs to be initialized in order to work and so on. Now you have Room. Same with other things. So like I said, I don't think we can be 100% there where someone can just jump in and start doing stuff. But even if we're there like 50% of the way, just making it easier, more accessible, have better docs, better APIs that are just easier to start with, then that's something. And we hope to see more collaboration between, let's say, iOS and Android teams or backend teams using Kotlin with Android. So that's definitely good feedback, and I think we're working in that direction. But I don't feel like our job will be done, in a year or so. I think we have still a lot to go.
All right, thanks. Good luck.
Hey, thank you for doing this, first of all. A question that arose that came to me with one question that was posed a little before is if there's any very long-term goal to wrap the context class in something which provides a little bit more clarity about what we should or should not do with it. A simple example would be an application context shouldn't be used for UI. UI context shouldn't be used for longer-lived stuff. And I feel like, at least in my experience, there's been a lot of errors, memory leaks, whatever, which arises from the fact that context is context and context is everything. I'm also aware that this is a very old class which is everywhere, so it will be hard to change, but tackled properly, maybe providing wrappers which do not give developers access to stuff they shouldn't do, maybe a first stepping stone removed for the future. So is there any plans in that direction was the question, or thoughts or whatever?
I'll take that. No, I don't think we have concrete plans. Like you say, it's such a fundamental class. Like I know we have a bunch of API regrets. Android's been around a long time, and I think a lot of people would consider the God object that is context, something that we probably wouldn't do again today. As to how do you rip it out? How do you fix that? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something we should think about. Should we expose it in Compose? It's kind of an escape hatch right now to kind of grab hold of the local context. At some point, maybe we should reconsider that. I think you can do some stuff with your DI, like marking, with annotations that this requires like an application context or something, like to try and break away from, to try and bring some kind of type safety. But I don't know. Like, can you imagine Android programming, removing it, access to the context? Imagine what your code base would look like.
I mean, a while ago, I couldn't imagine that the view class will be gone someday. And
That's true. That's true. It'll never be gone. It'll never be gone. It's always going to be there as the bridge.
I think, to be honest, Compose is improving this story because, for example, now in Compose, you can access resources by just calling resources. You don't have to get it from the context. Then we also have more flexibility in composition locals. So we have a local configuration, for example, or something like that. So where Compose, if you write Compose code, you feel like you need less of that, less of context. You can get string resource. You don't have to get the context to format a particular string. So yeah, Compose trying to make it better a little bit. It's really embedded into the platform. But.
Should we take bets from the panel on what year we'll get at-deprecated context? No? Anyone? No. No one's going to take that. Okay. No.
Thank you very much for that very thoughtful answer. Thank you.
I think that was the
So, when you have a composable and you want to track the display of the elements, but that element is inside of a scrollable content, I just discovered that if you only use a launched effect, every single time when you scroll out and in, the tracking is sent again, and probably we don't want that. So I was wondering if there is any recommendation to solve this problem, or just be aware of the state of the scroll is the only solution.
Should we take it?
I think Manu wants to take it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for example, with lazy list is that those composable functions might be out of the compositions. That's why you are seeing the effect being restarted. One solution is for example, the key to that effect, it could be remember serial, and that's going to keep it in memory for a longer time. That's one workaround. Second workaround is do you really need that effect? Can you do other stuff? Because launch effects should be used sparingly in your application as least as possible. So try to find another way to not use that launch effect and not try to remember serial. I don't know, other workarounds maybe?
Yeah, I mean, if it's work that must outlive that one element in the composition, that maybe you should start that work somewhere. Just use the launched effect or something else to trigger work in your app that would outlive it and just observe the state of that work in that list, right? Just present.
Or maybe hoist that to the view model, for example, that can do that job for you. With a
Thank
view
you so
model
much.
scope.
Let's go here.
Recently, we migrated from Groovy to Kotlin script and also to the version catalog. But one thing that I was missing in the architecture guide and kind of looked into the 9 Android app there is how modularization should be handled. I saw in the 9 Android app there are a lot of core modules and feature modules as well. Is this the opinionated way from Google side, or yeah? That's basically the question.
Was it published? We are.
Yeah. Learning journey.
The learning journey.
Yeah. So now in Android, we have a learning journey about modularization that explains why we took those decisions. But you mentioned the architecture guide. We are definitely working on the opinionated, like official content that fits most of the apps. So that's something that we're working on right now and will be published very soon.
Yeah, so I think in general, our opinion was always that you should modularize, but we didn't necessarily make it easy for people to find content about this. So we want to get better at this and provide some guidance.
So the learning journey we mentioned, if you go on now in Android in the GitHub repository, the learning journey is there somewhere. And I think we talked about modularization, I think navigation as well there, and we're planning to do more stories around now in Android.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. Since the new Android Studio Dolphin, we have the layout inspector to check the recompositions on composables. We need to be careful when we are passing a class that doesn't have the immutable or stable annotation to actually not recompose when we don't need to do that. Can we expect in the future to not have to add that annotation into classes, or having like a warning inside Android Studio, like you are passing this class that doesn't have this annotation, you might be checking that your composable is recomposing too much?
Maybe. We're definitely not done with the tooling. Like, yes, we added the recomposition counts to the layout inspector, and that's a good start. But like, we're not like done. We don't consider compose tooling finished by any measure. So yeah, we're actively investigating like how we can best like flag that to you. Like, should we show it like right in line in your code or something? We're actively working on it. No announcements to make right now, but like we're looking at it. Like, we released some tooling to, it sounds like you're aware of it, to actually, you can run a report and it'll tell you whether your classes are inferred or parameters are inferred as stable or unstable and so on. So that's like very raw, like command line tooling you have to run yourself as part of your build. So we're looking at ways to better visualize that at the places where you're actually writing the code. So nothing right now, but we're working on it basically.
I think I also want to make sure that you're not trying to, prevent problems before you even have them. I mean, some recomposition is normal, so don't try to get to a state where you have zero recomposition, because it's not needed. I think the problem appears when indeed you have like, way too many. You have some composables that recompose one or two times, but then you have others that recompose hundreds of times. So yeah, try to not to optimize too early, too immaturely.
Yeah, and we're also trying to like work on the inference as well. Like right now, we have some inference to try and work out whether something is stable or unstable. But like that could be smarter. So if you find instances where you run the reports and you see something is inferred as unstable that you think shouldn't be, then please file bugs, because we're trying to make that smarter as well. But yeah, the end goal is that you don't have to think about it as much, or we flag to you when it is likely a problem.
Got it. Thank you.
Cheers.
I think that one.
Hello. I have a question. Do you have any specific plans for supporting view models in Compose previews?
What we did.
There was a feature request. I don't know if it was fixed or not.
Because right now, if you would like to work with previews for the wall screens, like my solution was to work with UI states or maybe one callback from view model to handle every UI event. So in the end, every preview function had two parameters, one for the UI state, one as the callback. So then, thanks to that, I could not use a view model in my preview at all. But yeah, it's not always that possible?
I thought we did support it. I can check after. But yeah, generally we have recommend a pattern of having like a stateful and a stateless composable. So maybe you have a stateful one which kind of has access to the view model, extracts things from it, and then calls the stateless, the controlled version, giving it just the parameters that it needs. And so in that case, then you can pretty much preview the stateless one, because then you can just pass it the parameters that you need without having to rely on the view model specifically. So that pattern can work for you as well.
Okay, then I have another question. Are you using like previews for the wall screens or for small components? Like, because most of the tutorials like don't have previews at all, or maybe some of them, the sample apps, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I checked some of them and there is like not so many previews. Also, like not so many for the wall screens. Like, for example, if you have login screen, there are like maybe preview for a text field and for the button. So the question was, do you use like previews for the wall screens or just for the components?
Both. I think it's the easy answer to that. Yeah.
I think now in Android we have both for whole screens and for smaller composables. And then I know in our sample apps we have for both as well. Depends on the samples. But yeah, what I get from there is like we should add more previews and showcase previews and multi-previews as well now. More.
The previews.
Yes.
The previews, yeah.
I think it's whatever works for you, and I think actually live edit is an interesting angle on this as well, because I think the workflow of live edit and preview is pretty tight as well. So I think like the thing that you're working on, you want to preview it and have that tight like edit and see the changes cycle. So I think that'll probably drive people towards using more. Yeah, I think historically we maybe didn't add them as much on the samples, because I guess we started them when preview was less performant. I think it's gotten a lot better, so if you haven't checked it out in a while, like I think we should reconsider that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Hi, it's Ali. I have a question about Compose. Before that, I want to say thank you so much for all your efforts. Since 3 years ago, Android development is much more fun. I'm very happy with it compared to last 3 years. My question, one of my favorite components is the Compose navigation. I think sometimes I want to open a screen in full, but I don't want to use it as a new screen in my navigation. So it's like a very temporary screen, but it's not a dialog. I was wondering if there would be a workaround to achieve that.
So got it straight, you want to have a destination that isn't like a whole screen?
Yes, but it will be open in full screen, but it's not a screen. It's like a very temporary, tiny, quick.
So the difference is that it's temporary?
Yes.
Isn't everything temporary?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the difference between a normal screen and a temporary one?
So, like something that I mentioned, like when you open a new screen using Compose navigation, the screen behind it can lose its state, even you're using view model. So let's say you are in a shopping app and you want to have a filter opened in full screen, but you don't want to lose any state of the, like anything in the screen behind it.
Okay, so it's about the state.
There are APIs to do that, so check out the navigation options. You have a DSL where you can save state and restore the state, but it needs to be like specified whenever you want to use them. We have some examples, for example, in the bottom bar. It's a good thing, like whenever you restore or have the state, like for example, in your backstack, the view model is automatically going to be kept in memory as long as the destination is in the backstack. Take a look at our samples. For example, in the bottom bar, when we navigate between items, we save and restore that state to not lose it.
Do you know which sample?
Samples, which one use bottom bar navigation, for example?
Just
snack?
Now in Android?
Now in Android.
Now in Android.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm wondering if the...
Or the jets.
if the question was more about scoping a view model to a navigation graph, which could be an option that you should look into as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I think that one was first.
Okay, first off, thanks for all the hard work and the tooling. I think I have like 3 questions. Yeah. So there's this meme that goes around with Android choosing between experimental and deprecated. And so the first question is with testing, okay? When you're testing like a coroutine or something and you have to pass in a dispatcher. So in Android Studio, if you pass in the test coroutine dispatcher, it tells you it's deprecated. And there's this little dialog that comes up that gives you two options, and it asks you to choose, the recommended thing to use is either the standard test dispatcher or unconfined. Unfortunately, both of them are experimental. So at that point now, you're like, okay, so do I add experimental notation over these tests, or do I just stick with the deprecated one and who knows, maybe the next update, it gets removed. So what should we actually use, or at what point would standard or unconfined become stable so it's no longer experimental? So that's the first question. The second question is...
Wait.
Let's try to answer this one, and then...
We're not going to remember. Manu?
Yeah, I would say not to use deprecated APIs because they are not going to improve. Actually, like what you're talking about, like migrating from like lower versions of coroutines 1.6. Actually, Martin is giving a talk tomorrow about the new testing APIs. With experimental annotation, is like just giving you a heads up that something might change in the future. So pay attention. But yeah, so those APIs are going to improve over time. So try to stay away from deprecated stuff, trying to implement the new patterns, because those are the ones that are going to get improved. With experimental annotation as well, they are telling you indirectly that they want feedback. So if you are missing some features or something like that, make sure to file some requests if that particular API doesn't fit your use case.
Okay.
At the same time, sorry, here, in this specific situation, I think it's pretty clear that the deprecated APIs will not be removed until the next API is ready, right? So you can kind of continue to use the deprecated ones because the experimental ones will become stable and you will have time to migrate, right? So in this specific case, they're just making sure you have a migration path and you're not like without a way to test your coroutines.
Okay. So but a question 1.8 though. Usually, if you deprecate something, why isn't there like a main that's like stable before the experiment? I mean, it seems like it's either you're like at the point of breaking with something old, or you're at the point of breaking with something new. It's like you can't win,
So to be clear, this is an external library, right? Google doesn't deprecate APIs and coroutines. This is a JetBrains library.
Oh, okay. All right.
That phone is made by another company.
No, we feel your pain. We
empathize. I think we need to make that our last question.
Okay, so number 2 will be the last.
Wait, 1.A, does that count, or like?
No, so the second one is about repeat on life cycle and launch when started, resume the whole line. So I think when the whole line started, it was like the main thing, the recommended thing, the best thing, like the safest thing. So when repeat on lifecycle came, that became the safest thing. And launch when the whole line is going to be removed soon, according to the docs, and we should all use repeat on. But the problem is like launch when whole line, kind of fulfills some use cases, and repeat doesn't really do it, because repeat kind of like, it restarts the whole function when you come back. Like, it doesn't just pause it, it literally restarts it, instead of like maybe continuing from where it stopped. So there are cases where you would probably be getting values you wouldn't want. So in future, would there be a similar API like launch when X that would be safe to call, like repeat on, that wouldn't have the whole coroutine restart?
Manu?
Yeah, no, I don't think we are adding more APIs. I think like the launch when X, they have probably, pretty much like all like the functionality of those APIs should be covered with repeat on lifecycle. If that's not the case, let us know. I think, yeah, they are marked as deprecated, but we didn't find like a really use cases for those APIs that scale in general. We believe that repeat on lifecycle, it's a better generic, better API in general. So if you find a use case that it cannot be done with those APIs or like with a lifecycle observer, let us know, because then we might be like missing something out. But pretty much like everything, like every use case should be covered. Let us know if not.
All right.
And we're going to call it there. I'm very conscious that we're the only thing standing between you and the party, so we're going to get off the stage. But a massive thank you first for all the questions. Like, we really, really mean it. Like, we record all this feedback, we take it back and talk to the teams and try and make our products better for you. So it really helps to hear what you're struggling with. So thank you for all the questions. And also, we have a big booth over there, so please keep coming and talking to us. We'll write this all down and bring it all back to the team. So thanks for coming. Thanks for the panelists. Answering questions. Have a good welcome.
Thank you. Okay.